In our family, only the chosen child was allowed to ask questions about money until a probate hearing revealed why my name had been quietly removed from every version of the will. Growing up, there was one rule nobody questioned. Only my older brother Caleb was allowed to ask about money. It sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud, but in our family, it was treated as completely normal. If I asked how much something cost, my mother would tell me not to be rude. If I asked why Caleb got a new laptop while I was using a 7-year-old computer, my father would say finances were adult matters. Then Caleb would ask the exact same question 5 minutes later, and suddenly everyone would answer. When I was 12, I noticed it. When I was 16, it bothered me. By 25, I knew it meant something. I just didn't know what. The strange part was that Caleb never acted spoiled. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't demanding. Sometimes he looked almost uncomfortable when our parents included him in conversations they excluded me from. At family dinners, they would openly discuss investments with him, trusts, properties, insurance policies, retirement accounts. I would sit 3 feet away while they talked as if I weren't there. The moment I spoke up, the conversation ended. My father always had the same answer. You don't need to worry about these things. For years, I accepted it. Then my grandmother died, and everything changed. My grandmother, Evelyn, was the only person in the family who treated me and Caleb equally. She remembered birthdays. She called just to talk. She never played favorites. When she passed away at 86, everyone was devastated. At least that's what they claimed. The funeral felt strange from the beginning. My father seemed nervous. My mother barely spoke. Caleb looked exhausted. I assumed grief was affecting everyone differently. Then I noticed something odd. During the reception, relatives kept approaching me with confused expressions. One aunt hugged me and said she was sorry, not for my grandmother, for me. At the time, I didn't understand. I asked what she meant. She immediately changed the subject. That happened 3 separate times. Every conversation ended the same way. Sympathy, confusion, then silence. By the end of the day, I felt like everyone knew something I didn't. A week later, my father called a family meeting. He announced that probate proceedings would begin soon. He said the estate was straightforward, nothing to worry about, just paperwork. Then Caleb asked a question. The room instantly became tense. What version are they using? My father's face changed. It happened so quickly I almost missed it. Fear, actual fear. What do you mean? Dad asked. Caleb stared at him. The will. A long silence followed. Then my father said something that stuck with me. The final version. Not the latest version, not the current version. The final version. I didn't know why that wording bothered me, but it did. That night I couldn't stop thinking about it. What version are they using? Who asks that unless there are multiple versions? A few days later, I called Caleb. We weren't especially close, but we got along. I asked him what he'd meant. He hesitated. Then he said something even stranger. I thought you knew. Knew what? Another pause. Then he changed the subject. I hung up feeling sick for the first time in my life. I wondered if my brother had been keeping secrets from me. The probate hearing happened 6 weeks later. I attended because my grandmother had always been important to me. I expected a routine legal process. Instead, it felt like a bomb exploding in slow motion. The attorney began reviewing documents, assets, property, accounts, nothing unusual. Then he mentioned prior versions of the will. I saw my father's shoulders tense. The attorney explained that several revisions existed. Again, nothing unusual. People update wills all the time. Then he listed beneficiaries from previous versions. My name came up. Version after version, year after year, I was there. Equal shares between Caleb and me. Specific gifts, family heirlooms, everything seemed normal. Then came the final version. The attorney paused, looked at his paperwork, and continued. Only Caleb remained. My name was gone, completely gone, not reduced, not adjusted, erased. The room felt frozen. I genuinely thought I had misunderstood. I looked at Caleb. His face had turned pale. I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The attorney kept talking. Legal language blurred together. I heard almost none of it. One thought kept repeating in my head. Why, after the hearing ended, I confronted my parents. My mother started crying immediately. That was never a good sign. My father tried to dismiss it. He claimed my grandmother had changed her mind. That was all. No explanation. No context. Just changed her mind. I asked why. He didn't know. I asked when. He wasn't sure. I asked who had arranged the revision. He became angry. The conversation ended with him accusing me of being greedy. That accusation hurt more than I expected. I wasn't upset about the money. I was upset because my grandmother would never have done that without telling me. Never. Something didn't fit. And for the first time in my life, I decided not to let it go. I contacted the probate attorney myself, not to challenge anything, just to understand. There wasn't much he could tell me, but he did confirm one detail. The final revision occurred only 3 months before my grandmother died. That surprised me. She had already been sick, very sick. The timeline felt important. Then I learned something else. The appointment for the revision had been scheduled by my father, not my grandmother, my father. The first real crack appeared right there. I started asking relatives questions. Most refused to get involved. Then one cousin finally told me something. Years earlier, my grandmother had complained about family pressure, specifically pressure regarding inheritance. At first, I assumed she meant ordinary family drama. Then my cousin remembered a detail. My grandmother had said she was tired of being asked to fix the mistake. The mistake, not mistakes, singular, one mistake. Nobody knew what she meant, but suddenly I had a new mystery. What mistake? The answer arrived from somewhere I never expected. My brother. 2 months after probate began, Caleb showed up at my apartment. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept. We sat at my kitchen table for nearly an hour before he finally spoke. I think Dad lied. I almost laughed. At that point, I knew Dad had lied. The question was about what? Caleb explained that he'd been allowed into financial discussions his entire life, not because he was the favorite, because Dad was preparing him. Preparing him for what? Inheritance, family assets, property management, everything. Dad treated Caleb like the future head of the family. I asked why. Caleb stared at the table. Then he said something that changed everything. Because he always thought it would all go to me. Always, not eventually, always. That wording mattered. I asked what he meant. He told me about conversations he'd overheard as a teenager, arguments between Dad and Grandma, discussions about bloodlines, legacy, family names, things that seemed meaningless at the time. Then he told me the part he'd never understood. Our grandmother constantly referred to me as the rightful heir. Not Caleb, me, the rightful heir. Neither of us knew what that meant, but now I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few weeks later, another clue surfaced. One of my grandmother's old friends contacted me. Apparently, she'd heard about the probate situation. She wanted to meet. We spent 2 hours talking. Most of it was memories, stories, family history. Then she mentioned a locked box. A box my grandmother had kept for decades. According to her friend, Grandma once said the box contained proof of something that would matter after she died. I asked proof of what? The woman didn't know, but she remembered where the box had been stored, a safe deposit box at a local bank. My heart nearly stopped. I contacted the executor. The box existed, and legally its contents had to be reviewed. 3 weeks later, we opened it. Inside were photographs, letters, old legal documents. Nothing immediately shocking. Then I found a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was from my grandmother. "If you're reading this," she wrote, "then they finally went through with it." I read that sentence 3 times. Then I kept reading. Halfway through the letter, everything I thought I knew about my family shattered. My grandmother claimed that my father had spent over 20 years trying to remove me from inheritance plans. Not because he disliked me, because he believed I wasn't his biological child. I couldn't breathe. I read the line again and again. The room spun. My grandmother explained that shortly after I was born, someone had convinced my father that my mother had been unfaithful. No proof ever existed, just rumors, suspicions, whispers, yet my father believed them. According to Grandma, he never completely accepted me afterward. Not openly, not publicly, but privately, financially, emotionally. The difference was always there. Suddenly, my entire childhood made sense. The exclusion, the distance, the money conversations, everything, but the letter wasn't finished. The next revelation was even worse. My grandmother claimed my father eventually received DNA results proving I was his biological son. Results he never shared, results he concealed, results he ignored. I felt physically sick, because if that was true, then none of this was about uncertainty. It was about pride. My father had built an entire worldview around a lie, and admitting he was wrong would destroy it. I confronted my mother first. She broke down immediately. That told me everything. She admitted the DNA test existed. She admitted Dad knew the truth. She admitted she'd begged him to stop treating me differently. For years, he refused. I asked why. Her answer still haunts me. Because after so long, he couldn't admit what he'd done. Not wouldn't, couldn't. The lie had become part of his identity. Every decision he'd made depended on it. Every favoritism, every exclusion, every financial choice, every family dynamic. Accepting reality meant admitting he'd failed his own son, so he chose denial instead. I thought that was the end. I was wrong, because one question remained. Why did my grandmother remove me from the final will? The letter explained that too, and somehow it hurt even more. A year before her death, my father threatened to challenge her estate, not because he needed money, because he wanted certainty. He wanted everything secured for Caleb. According to the letter, Grandma feared a legal battle would drain the estate and destroy the family, so she made a decision, a terrible decision. She removed me temporarily, then created documentation explaining why. Documentation she hid in the safe deposit box. She believed the evidence would surface after her death. She believed the truth would eventually protect me. What she hadn't anticipated was how devastating the truth would be. When I finally confronted my father, he didn't deny any of it, not a single word. We sat across from each other in silence. Then he admitted he'd believed the rumors, admitted he'd seen the DNA results, admitted he'd hidden them. I asked why he never told me. His answer was almost pathetic. Things had already gone too far. 20 years, that was his explanation. 20 years had gone too far. I asked if he'd ever loved me. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he quietly said yes. And somehow that made everything worse. Because if he loved me, then every choice had been deliberate. Every exclusion had been intentional. Every wound had been avoidable. The person who surprised me most was Caleb. I expected defensiveness. Instead, he looked horrified. He told me he'd spent years believing our parents trusted him more because he was smarter, more responsible, better with money. Learning the truth devastated him. His entire identity had been built on preferential treatment he never understood, treatment he never earned. For months afterward, our family fell apart. Relatives chose sides, arguments erupted, old secrets surfaced. People admitted they'd suspected something for years. Others confessed they knew more than they'd ever said. The family image everyone had protected for decades collapsed almost overnight. The probate dispute eventually settled. The evidence in the safe deposit box changed everything. The final will remain valid, but separate legal agreements and instructions from my grandmother compensated for what had happened. In the end, the financial outcome mattered far less than I expected. Because by then, money wasn't the issue anymore. The issue was truth. The issue was realizing that my entire childhood had been shaped by a suspicion proven false before I was old enough to understand it. The issue was knowing my father chose his pride over reality, again and again, year after year. The strangest part is that I don't hate him. I thought I would. Instead, I mostly feel sadness, because he sacrificed his relationship with me to defend a mistake he already knew was a mistake. He spent decades protecting a lie, and in the end, that lie destroyed exactly what he was trying to preserve. My grandmother's letter sits in a drawer beside my desk now. I read it sometimes. One sentence always stands out. She wrote that secrets don't stay buried forever. They don't disappear. They grow roots. They spread through families. They shape lives long before anyone discovers them. Looking back, I realized the signs were everywhere. The money conversations, the favoritism, the strange silences, the unanswered questions, the way everyone seemed afraid of something they couldn't name. The truth had been sitting in the middle of our family for decades, visible from every angle, hidden only because nobody wanted to look directly at it. And the most painful part of all is this. For my entire childhood, I thought the mystery was why I wasn't allowed to ask questions about money. The real mystery was why nobody was allowed to ask questions about me. By the time the probate hearing revealed my name had vanished from every version of the will, the inheritance wasn't what had been stolen. The inheritance was just the evidence. What had really been taken from me was 20 years of belonging, and no court, no settlement, and no amount of money could ever give that back.